Hello everybody, this is Sir Jet and welcome to another episode of The Contemporary World. Before anything else, I'd like to ask you, do you notice that I have a new haircut today? Do you like it? Do you know who is my barber? Yes, it's me. I did this. I cut my own hair. Anyway, let's go now to our lesson. Today we will have a long lecture, or we will have a long lesson divided into 3 lectures. We will talk about economic globalization. Okay? So, last time we talked about political globalization, how the world experienced so many transformations or so many ideas about politics and how it transformed the world. Today we will talk about the economic systems that were developed through time and were experienced by the world. So again, our style is I will walk you through world history and discuss to you the different economic systems that we have experienced. Alright, so this is the overview of the next 3 meetings. This is a long lesson, so we divided it into chewable bits. For today, we will talk about part 1, the economic systems in the pre-colonial era of the world. Part 2, we will talk about the economic systems from the pre-colonial era to the post-colonial era. And part 3, we will talk about the age of economic cooperation, which is what we are experiencing now. Okay, so let's begin with part 1, the pre-colonial economic system. Okay, so pre-colonial means this is the time before the Europeans traveled the world and colonized the continents. So let us begin with the hunting and gathering nomadic societies or the prehistoric times. And what is the economic system that was in play during this time? They have the simplest economic system, which is hunting and gathering. They don't have money, they don't really talk about trade and stocks. No, they don't have any idea about that because life was simple. They just roam the face of the earth looking for food, animals to hunt, and fruits to gather or to pick up. In Tagalog, this is what we call isang kahig, isang tuka kind of lifestyle or economic system. In English, it's called the hand-to-mouth subsistence. So life was very simple until these people started to live in cities because of the agricultural revolution. So if you remember the lesson last time, people learned how to domesticate animals and plant crops. And they did these things in their backyard beside the rivers because water is their source of life, not only for them but also for their animals and crops. So cities were developed in this time of history. And in those cities where people lived, wealth was measured by how much sheep or cattle one has. It's not by how much money you have, because money was not yet invented during this time. So the more animals you have in your backyard, the more wealthy you are, okay, compared to your neighbors. Now, if you will counter-check this to the Bible timeline, this happened during the time of Abraham, if you're familiar with the guy, or Job, wherein it was mentioned in those stories how much these people were wealthy because they have so much or so many sheep and cattle. Okay? So money was not yet invented. It's not mentioned in those literature, okay, that existed during that time. One of them is the Bible, that money was used already in this time. Okay, so when was this? Counter check your world history books. This is the time of the great river civilizations, like the ones in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Indus River. Okay, so we studied that already, and money was not yet invented in that time. Now, when people started to live in cities and have their own pen, where they have their animals and their own plots of plants, barter trade soon developed. Because imagine, if you are a farmer and all you have for food is chickens, pigs, and corn or rice in your backyard, sooner or later you would want to taste some other kind of food, or where will you get your other things or possessions like clothes, like shoes and bags and baskets? So you don't have those things. Now your neighbor would have those things. So barter trade was developed. Okay? Now this is the time when money was not yet invented. So you're hungry, you have an apple, your neighbor has a banana, you say, so let's exchange. Okay? No money involved. That's called barter trade. Goods for goods. So this is the economic system that evolved out of those river civilizations in those city-states. And when those city-states later evolved into small kingdoms, taxation was invented, because now they would have a king or a monarch to be in charge politically over them. Now, on the economic side of life, the kings or the monarchs would need resources to run the kingdom. So they would get the resources from the people through taxation. And taxation was in kind, not in cash, because again, money was not yet invented during this time. So how does that work? Taxation in kind. For example, the king would made a decree that 10% of all the harvest of the people in his kingdom he would collect as taxes. So if you're a farmer and you have 100 sacks of potatoes as harvest, that means 10% is 10 sacks. You will give that to the king, and you will make do with the 90 sacks. That would be your food and your material for barter. But the 10 sacks of potatoes will go to the king, and all the other people would give 10% of their harvest also, and then the king would use that for himself and for running the kingdom, like maintaining an army. And we see this practice over here. If you notice this Egyptian artwork found in the ruins in Egypt. Okay, so these are ruins, or taken from ruins that of some temple or pyramid in ancient Egypt, and we can see in the illustration that the king would have some workers under him. They're planting, they're harvesting, and there's a tax collector over here who gets some portion of the harvest of the people. And this practice of taxation happened not only in ancient Egypt, but also in ancient Mesopotamia and other small kingdoms in the old times. So aside from barter trade of food, okay, people also did some other jobs, okay, aside from farming, because in that city some people became craftsmen and artisans. Craftsmen who would make some farm tools. Okay, so this is a blacksmith. Okay, and this one carves some statue. Okay, and the others do some other crafts like baskets. Okay, shoes, clothes. So these are people who are not farmers, but they are people who work other jobs, and their products they exchange for the products of the farmers, because the farmers also need their products. Okay, the farmer would need some farm tools, would need baskets, shoes, and other stuff, and these people would need food. Okay, they would need meat and eggs and vegetables, so they exchange with the other people in their neighborhood. Okay, so furniture also, okay, and jewelry, and these people became new players in the barter trade, because at first the characters in the barter trade were farmer and farmer. Okay, I have food here, you have food there, I don't have that kind of food, let's exchange. Simple barter trade of food. Then later on we have new players in the barter trade, the craftsmen and artisans. Now another group of people aside from the farmers and the craftsmen and the monarchs rose, and these are the middlemen or merchants. Okay, who exactly are these people? Okay, these people are the ones who would act or who would bring a product of a city to another city. Okay, so a city would have a public market, and another city several kilometers away would also have the same public market. Now some products in the first public market may not be present in the second public market. So we have here merchants who would barter trade, okay, some products in market A. Okay, for example, market A has a chicken, okay, and market B does not have chicken, but market B has ducks. Okay, so he would bring chicken to market B and exchange the chicken with the duck in market B, and he can bring the duck to market A and exchange it for some other product that he may want. Okay, so these are middlemen because they are in the middle of two markets. And so trading, what do you notice now? Expanded geographically. Before, products just revolve around or within the city. But with these merchants, products now travel farther. Okay, the circle of the movement of products became bigger thanks to the merchants. And what is the effect of this? If you are from market B, you will now be seeing new products that you haven't seen before. Products coming from another kingdom that the merchants brought to your kingdom, to your community. And in the same way, your products are being seen now by the people in the other kingdom. So that's the effect of the work of the merchants. Okay, so they travel far and wide riding camels, okay, because the tricycle was not yet invented at that time, so they ride on camels and bring products like precious gems, um, uh, aside from food, crafts, okay, like baskets, rugs, and other thing that the other city does not have. And so, on the merchant, the effect of this system, okay, is that they became a wealthy social class because they are diligent in barter trade, traveling from one city to another. They were able to amass large sums, not of money because money was not yet invented, but products, okay, like carabaos and chickens and sheep and cattle, and the products like baskets and other thing that one kingdom would have. Now the merchant would have that. So the merchants became a wealthy social class, probably second wealthiest after the nobility or after the royal class. And so later, if you're a merchant and your wealth is measured by how many sheep and cattle you have, that would be very, very difficult for you to keep or to carry around. Okay, you're able to amass 1,000 sheep and 500 cows. Now you want to sell those wealth of yours to another city. It's very difficult to travel 1,000 sheep and 500 cows to a kingdom far, far away. And so later on, the currency that was developed was gold. Instead of carrying around lots of animals with you, the merchants just used gold as a means to measure up the products that they are trading with another person. Do you get it? For example, you went to a city, and that guy over there in the market is selling a very nice Nokia 3210. Okay, do you know a Nokia 3210? A very elegant cell phone. And then the guy who owns the cell phone says, "I want 3 carabaos for this Nokia 3210." Okay, and the merchant says, "Oh, I really love that cell phone, but 3 carabaos to bring along, that's quite difficult. But anyway, I have here 3 grams of gold in my pocket." Okay, and the equivalent of 3 grams of gold is 3 carabaos. So let me have your Nokia 3210, and here's your 3 grams of gold. Okay, and that's how easy trading became. So you just carry around pieces of gold or grams of gold, no longer large animals with you. Okay, but of course, the Nokia 3210 was not yet invented during that time. That is just a hypothetical story. Okay, now, the kingdoms evolved into empires, as we have studied in political globalization. So kingdoms invaded other kingdoms, and now you have empires. And they do this invasions for economic gain. Okay? Remember that gold now is the measure of wealth. It's no longer how many animals, but how much gold you have. That is now the measure of wealth. Okay? And of course, the old system would have agricultural products and number of servants or slaves as a measure of wealth. But gold is the primary measure of wealth now, aside from treasures like precious gems. So a kingdom would invade another kingdom so they could get the gold, the treasures, okay, the agricultural produce, and the slaves of the other kingdom. And in making so, they make themselves a stronger empire. And so they invade other kingdoms, neighboring kingdoms, and ransack the palace and the temple of those kingdoms of the gold and treasures, and so they became powerful. If you counter-check this in the history timeline of the Bible, probably this is the time of Daniel. You know Daniel, the guy who was thrown to the lions. Okay, remember that his kingdom was invaded by another kingdom, and their treasures, okay, the treasures of Daniel's kingdom were ransacked. The gold in the temple, the gold in the king's palace were taken away and brought to Babylon. So that's an example of how economic, or what economic system prevailed during the ancient times of the empires. Okay, kingdom getting the gold of the other kingdom. And later on, money was invented. Okay, so gold may be very difficult to carry later on, like grams and grams of gold, kilograms of gold. So they just turn it into coins. And so money was invented. So in the Bible, during the time of Jesus Christ, there was money already. Okay, so there's around 500 years, 600 years after Daniel, we find Jesus Christ being asked by the people, shall we pay taxes? And then Jesus said, show me a coin. Okay, and whose face do you see on the coin? Caesar's, the people say. And so Jesus said, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God. So in that story, in that Bible story, we know that money was already existing, okay, during the time of Jesus. So around that time when money was invented. All right. So we stop there, because part 2 we will transition, or we will talk about another era in world history. But as for today, what have we accomplished, or what have we talked about? Okay, so we studied part 1 of economic globalization. We started with the hunting and gathering system, which evolved into the barter system in the city-states, and the barter became wider because of the merchants, okay, wider in scope, okay, and then the measure of wealth from animals, it became gold, and it became money during the time of the ancient empires. So we will leave it up to there at the moment, and we will continue the story next meeting. This is Sir Jet saying thank you, and I'll see you in our next episode.